There have been more than 109 billion people who have lived and died since we as a species first appeared. This is every ancestor and every human that has come before us. And this number is an amazing spectacle of just how long our species has actually been on this planet. Of course, most of these people that have since passed on are only accounting for the last 4,000 years, yet an astonishing 9 billion have been from ages long since past, living in a time before we settled as agriculturalists. Now, we can date bodies quite comfortably, given a few perimeters, and from this we encounter a very natural problem. Where are all the bodies from the distant past? You'd expect to find bones everywhere, scattered across ancient landscapes, lying beneath our feet, maybe even a tooth or phalanges on the surface. But outside of burials, caves, and rare bogs, the vast majority of these billions have simply disappeared. As an archaeologist, we know that bones don't last forever. Age, soil, water, weather, and scavenging animals can destroy human remains, making it so skeletons break down completely unless conditions are perfect. This accounts for the surface skeletons, but of course, we are social beings. We love and we give meaning to death. We have so for a very long time. Our ability to give meaning to death causes us in the modern age to bury and cremate our dead. And research shows our ancestors may have done the same. But why? Why did and why do we still care about the dead? Though there are ongoing debates regarding how we date our early burials, earliest human burial is believed by some to be around 100,000 years ago at a cave site in Israel. Inside, archaeologists uncovered a human skeleton stained with red ochre, surrounded by stone tools and animal bones. It was symbolic. The ochre may have been body paint and the grave goods an offering. A moment in history where we can say that we were thinking about death as meaning something. But while this is the earliest burial related to our ancestors, Homo sapiens, it is not the earliest in our genus. Burials are attributed to a number of our genus. Neanderthals are quite famous for also burying their dead, especially in very similar ways to how our early ancestors buried their dead. However, there are some recognizable differences. Homo naledi is another Homo ancestor that may have also buried their dead, with a site found deep in South Africa. Researchers studying the area have found what look like deliberate graves, pits cut into cave floors, bodies curled and placed inside. We don't know why Homo naledi did this, but it suggests that even our distant cousins recognize death as something significant. One major challenge with this though is understanding the symbolism we put on burying the dead. It is likely at the beginning, our burying of the dead was practical. Dead bodies attract flies, spread disease, and draw scavengers. Putting them underground could have been about survival. But quickly, the burial became something more. It became a ritual act. Archaeologist Dr. Randolph Quinney explains that humans grieve much like elephants or crows, who mourn their dead in their own ways. Burial for us may have been a way of expressing that grief, a recognition that death is final, but the memory of the person is not. Another interesting aspect that we can look at is how the burying of dead has changed over time in the archaeological record. We can see that this first burial is completely different to burials thousands of years later. We can understand that these burials likely transformed to attain a different meaning. It could have been about respect of the bodies, closure, prepping for the afterlife, religion, and/or practicality of preventing disease. But over time, burials became more elaborate. Grave goods, body positions, orientation, depth, each carried symbolic meaning. A simple act of disposal had grown into a profound cultural marker. In Australia, we know by 40,000 years ago, cremation was the preferred burial practice among some of the indigenous people. We can see this in the Mungo Lady. In ancient Rome, cremation dominated early funerary practice, with ashes stored in carefully crafted urns. Later, burials took centre stage, with stone sarcophagi and elaborate tombs. Meanwhile, in other regions, burial traditions shifted back and forth, from inhumation to cremation, depending on the culture and the time. And I want to focus on this aspect because this is extremely useful in archaeology. We can track shared ideas between groups based on changing burial traditions. An example of this can be seen at a site in Central Europe, where during the corded ware culture, Burials focused on single individuals placed in crouched positions aligned along a northwest-southeast axis, often accompanied by cord and press pottery and battle axes. Skip to a few centuries later during the bell beaker culture and the pattern changes entirely. Graves now include individuals buried with a distinctive bell-shaped pottery, copper daggers, and ornaments made of gold or shell, reflecting new ideas of status and identity. This transformation likely reflects the major cultural shift that spread across Europe during the late 3rd millennium BCE, when bell beaker communities gradually absorbed or replaced earlier corded-ware populations. This tells us something powerful. Burials weren't just about the dead, but about identity, belonging, and cultural boundaries. However, there are of course biases. When archaeologists interpret ancient burials, we often carry our own biases. Christian burials face east for resurrection, Islamic burials align toward Mecca, Zoroastrian traditions avoid earth and fire entirely. These modern frameworks sometimes creep into archaeology, colouring how we understand burials tens of thousands of years older than our modern religions. Were people buried in certain ways because of ritual or because of environment? Sometimes it's impossible to know. What is clear is that burials are more than practical. They are windows into what it means to be human. They show us grief, respect, identity and memory. They track migration and cultural exchange. They reveal when the symbolic thought, the ability to imagine meaning beyond survival, first appeared in our species and our genus. From ochre-stained skeletons in Israel to cremations in Australia, from Roman urns to modern cemeteries, burials connect us across time. So then how did our ancient ancestors deal with the dead? Well, somewhere in our early evolutionary history, we started burying them, returning them to the earth. The ones we do find curled in caves, painted in ochre, cremated in ancient hearths, whisper something profound. They remind us that we've always struggled with death, that we've always sought meaning in loss. And in those graves from 100,000 years ago to today, we can see the very beginnings of what it means to be human.